Hi everyone, this is the first episode of the Bharatvaarta podcast. Now, this is going to be a discussion on elections, policy, and culture in India, something like India 2020 and beyond, where we get people from different walks of life with an active interest in what's happening here and how they can make sense of things at all. Yeah. So I'm joined by Aashish. Hey, Aashish.
Hey, Roshan.
And I'm joined by Rohit as well. Hi, Rohit.
Hi, Roshan.
And we're going to be discussing a couple of things. Interestingly, Trump's visit to India and how that affects the US election and the significance of it all. So let me get started. So Trump is going to be here for about 36 hours, expected to visit the Taj, see a few monuments, and there is Namaste Trump that's planned as well, along the lines of Howdy Modi. Interesting times. Aashish, any comment?
Yes, interesting timing of the visit as well for President Trump. He's not known to be a very frequent traveler, and that he has taken time out, even if it's just a couple of days in the election year. I think it's pretty surprising actually. And let's see what's in store in his visit a couple of days from now.
Yeah, so what do you think about any of the relevant policies that might come up, Rohit?
Yeah, so I think the first big event for him is what you mentioned as Namaste Trump, where it's a big gathering in Ahmedabad. So now this is something that's important both for President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, because this is where they're basically inaugurating the revamped cricket stadium in Ahmedabad, which is now the world's largest cricket stadium. That's going to be inaugurated by the two of them. So now, as I'm sure a lot of people may be aware, the Prime Minister was the head of the Gujarat Cricket Association for a very long time before he actually became the Prime Minister. And then it was Mr. Amit Shah who was heading it. Some sort of personal achievement for them to have, built this massive stadium in Ahmedabad, and now President Trump is inaugurating it. So his very presence there is a big... it's sort of a vote of confidence from President Trump in the India-US relationship at a larger level, and his personal equation with the Prime Minister as we head into the last year of his first term, and how things may pan out if he actually gets a second term. So just that event in Ahmedabad, that way just shows the personal part of the relationship between the two leaders, which is something that which Mr. Modi has always focused on in terms of his diplomacy, in creating a personal relation between him on one side and leaders on the other. Whether it started with President Obama, now there's President Trump. The same was the case with Mr. Cameron from the UK, or even if you see what the kind of meetings he has had with the Chinese President Mr. Jinping, whether in Chennai or I think previously even in Ahmedabad. So that's sort of the overarching theme, I think, from the visit. In terms of just pure deliverables, we've heard a lot of noise on how the trade deal is not going to actually come through this time.
Yeah.
So that is something I think it's sort of a message that the personal relations are in place, and hopefully these kind of concrete policy deliverables will flow from that over the next few years, especially if, of course, President Trump is re-elected.
Okay. Is defense procurement something of that sort going to come up? Is H-1B visas, which is again a kind of a boilerplate issue, are those going to be discussed as well? I mean, this is a question for any of you.
So I can talk about the defense procurement part, Gary. So see, there are few threads which are going on, right? So firstly, the Cabinet Committee on Security has cleared about 14 US multi-role helicopters procurement. This is for the Indian Navy, right? So this deal will definitely be announced. This is the procurement of the MH-60R Seahawk helicopters. I think it's about $2.5 billion. So this will be produced by Lockheed Martin. This has also been cleared on the US side actually. So the deal should get announced. So this is one, which is 2.6 billion is not a like a huge number, but significant part of India's capex budget for next year. So in that sense, significant for India, maybe just about okay to keep Trump happy. There is also a discussion about signing 6 new Apache helicopter deals. I think that has also been cleared by the government, and that's I think just under $1 billion. And I think this also is likely to be announced by President Biden, which we are looking at. This the Indian government had taken options to buy Apache helicopters as part of the earlier deal which we did for Indian Air Force. So I think this will be an option. I mean, this is using the option from that deal. There's also a few other discussions which have opened up, unlikely to be part of this visit, but a few other topics which have come up. So one is Boeing's the P-8I long-range maritime aircrafts. So India had placed an order in the last decade. That order is just now getting fulfilled, but India might sign sign up for 6 new of these aircrafts, and that will be the first such deal under the Comcasa agreement, which was signed earlier between the two governments. That's the communications capability and security agreement. So I think that is another one which is currently being discussed, although it won't be finalized in this visit. And then, of course, there has been some more excitement around Boeing trying to pitch for the F-15 EX pitch for India, and a couple of other discussions which Boeing is again trying to bring on the table. So I think the visit might revive the discussions around the defense procurements from US and different walks. The fact that the noise around the S-400 procurement from Russia has died down a little bit, and I think these discussions might essentially provide a counterbalance to the procurement from US via Russia, and should keep Trump happy in an election year. So although it's not numerically very significant for the US, but I think it's good optics overall. And the fact that Boeing comes in again in discussions about some of its offerings, I think that again will keep the Trump constituency happy domestically. So that was on the defense agreement side. On the H-1B, it's been a ongoing discussion between the Indian industry and the US government. The fact that the US government hasn't yet canned the option of the employment authorization documentation for the H4 holders, I think that's been a little bit of a relief. But overall, yes, I think it's an issue which certainly it's not just about this visit, but also a larger issue with respect to the trade deal, which is right now not being signed off. But the fact that the whole labor movement should be in the ambit of a trade deal is very critical from an India standpoint. I mean, that was also one of the inputs in the RCEP pull out of India, where the countries were not willing to discuss the labor movement very, very easily. And I think this will be one of the. I mean, this would continue to be one of the bottlenecks to the larger trade deal, apart from the other 3-4 thorny issues which have been hanging around.
Do you think Kashmir will come up at all?
I think some analysts have talked about this possibility that Trump has twice or thrice now given hints that he wants to mediate, etc. Clearly, there will be no bandwidth for him to do anything in this election year. In about a couple of months from now, the US election process will be out in full swing, and he will have no time from then until November to really look at anything more internationally. India has obviously denied or declined all help from Trump. India, in fact, after the last couple of meetings, had made very specific declarations or put out advisories in the media saying India was not open to any mediation, which has been our stated position. So I don't think there'll be there can be any help sought from US at this stage. But one possibility could be that Trump might ask India to be more participative in Afghanistan in terms of putting feet on the ground, and in lieu of that might reduce the rhetoric on Kashmir or even help India in some direct or indirect ways. So that trade-off could be possible, but otherwise formally I don't think the Indian government will recognize any intervention from US on the Kashmir issue.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one can't get away from the fact that this is a huge symbolic visit, right? I mean, the nitty-gritties, be that as they are. I think with the U.S. elections coming up, I mean, it's just you can't escape the symbolism of this visit, right? And possibly position this to woo Indian American voters as well. So. Any comments on that, Rohit?
Yeah, so see, I think from President Trump's perspective, he will be definitely trying to send out a message to the Indian American voters also, who I think from Indian American voters, there are two things, right? One is, of course, the sheer number of votes, and the other is their financial muscle. Because while Indian Americans are, I think, the largest growing immigrant community in the US or something, they are not, because of the peculiar nature of this of their presidential system, they are not actually well dispersed electorally, in the sense that a lot of them are primarily in California, New Jersey, or Texas, which are, I mean, none of them are really swing states, so as to speak, which is where all the action is in a presidential election. But the other part of the Indian American this thing is whether they can help financially as one of the wealthiest communities in the US. And interestingly, Trump, while he's a billionaire and all of that, was actually heavily outspent by Hillary Clinton in 2016. And depending on who he's going to face this year, that's quite possibly something that's going to repeat, because unlike a lot of other billionaires who are contesting, like on the Democratic side, especially with whether Mr. Bloomberg or Tom Steyer for that matter, he has really not shown any interest in dipping into his personal fortune, so as to speak, to campaign, and he relies on the old-fashioned method of donations. The other thing is, even last time Mr. Trump won a lot of states by very close margins, and any help that Indian Americans as a community may be able to offer, even in those states where there may not be large numbers per se, but like if you're winning a state by 0.1%, then every vote really counts. And again, just to draw something from the recent British election that happened, like the Indian community there massively swung once again to the Conservative Party, driven in large parts due to concern over the rhetoric of the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn on Kashmir, etc. And that is something that you can see in large sections of the Democratic Party today. So President Trump may be trying to capitalize on that, and while from a much smaller base, see if he can get a benefit electorally from that. And Prime Minister Modi's endorsement is definitely not going to hurt him in that. I wouldn't say endorsement, but association with Prime Minister Modi is definitely not going to hurt him in that capacity, of course.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that as well, because what with all of the Democratic nominees expressing their views clearly on Kashmir, have they kind of distanced Indian American voters, so to speak, right? And does President Trump see sort of an opportunity to kind of move in and capture that space? So you put it very rightly. So that's at least from a financial standpoint, right? It makes complete sense, so to speak, right? Do you want to dip into the US election at all? Since we spoke about it, so Sanders wins Nevada.
Yeah, so Roshan, it was really a slightly unexpected victory if you look at the overall how the campaigns shaped up for the last 1 year. Because I just saw a tweet which said that Biden was leading in Nevada in every poll till the last 10 days. So clearly something's shifted in the lines in the US since the actual voting began with Iowa and then New Hampshire. And Senator Sanders was really picking up a lot of momentum on the Democratic side. And I think that's something that's really impacted Joe Biden, especially because he was a front runner initially, and everyone expected him to be the the flag bearer of the moderates, so as to speak. And he was expecting a good show in Nevada, and that's not come out. Now he's facing competition even for the moderate vote. You see, even in Nevada, from Mayor Pete, who did well in Iowa also. And of course, Mayor Bloomberg is there waiting for Super Tuesday to, get into the thick of things, while right now just spending a lot of money and making himself get attention more and more. So the Democrats are going to have a very divided season with some sort of the signs of an anyone but Sanders movement also cropping up, especially among the more business-friendly parts of the Democrats. There's also a lot of past history between Sanders and a lot of Democrats due to how things panned out in his fight against Hillary Clinton. So a lot of bad blood is there, and let's see how that plays out in terms of, one, whether Mr. Sanders is able to capitalize on his wins and get a nomination, and two, even if he gets his nomination, how will the party be able to unite behind him to take on President Trump, who's basically soon up the Republican nomination completely by now.
Yeah. I think people also believe Bernie has the largest African American base, right? So, so that could be a factor in the whole thing as well, where they might feel that, he might be the best representative to compete against President Trump. Any of you?
Yeah. So, actually, in the last time Bernie ran, African Americans were his Achilles heel, so as to speak. It was widely expected that would turn out to be the case even this time. But one thing a lot of people have been noting in the US is how the base of the Bernie coalition has completely shifted over 4 years. And African Americans, especially younger African Americans, are a huge part of the Bernie base. So are Hispanics. And in the American political scene right now, Democrats do rely heavily on minority votes to be competitive or to win elections, and that really does give Bernie a huge advantage as we go in.
Okay. So, all right, guys, let's do a simple, Trump versus kind of an exercise here, since we're talking about the US elections anyway. So, Aashish, do you want to take Trump versus Sanders?
Yeah, sure. So my sense is that in a Trump versus Sanders battle, Trump will win. Both the candidates are very polarizing in their own ways. Sanders has got some difficult times ahead with the business lobby, especially with what Rohit alluded to earlier. Some of his ideas are going to be directly conflicting with their interests. So, for example, Sanders wants like a single payer medical insurance for all type of a system. Now that doesn't square up very well with the very large private insurance industry in the US. So there are a lot of people who are directly involved in the industry. So how does that impact the voting intention? The fact that he's a very active and a very proud socialist, I think that to my mind will be a negative eventually. It sounds very, it beggars belief that US will actually elect a self-declared socialist. Most of the Democrats are capitalists in their own ways, and the policies actually do not diverge that much from the center. There could be a few things here and there, but largely there has been fair amount of alignment in the last few years of US policies, especially the external facing policies. Exactly. So the intention of Sanders, the kind of stuff which he's spoken about, it's not just about changing what's happening in the country, but also externally. So it is very it is very tough to believe that he might actually get the nomination itself to start off. But if it does, probably he's undecided or the centrist voters towards Trump.
Okay. Yeah, so next up is Bloomberg. Bloomberg has been pretty interesting, kind of adopting the Trump style of, battling elections against the man himself. Trash talking plenty, and, seems like a pretty interesting person. So what do you think about that, Rohit?
Yeah, so I think Bloomberg is the polar opposite of Sanders, in the sense that he is probably going to appeal a lot to some of these pro-business, what they call traditionally the country club Republicans, your traditional business professional community who are anyway not very happy with the way President Trump governs, or for that matter even behaves. And those are the kind of people who are going to be attracted to by Bloomberg. The problem with Bloomberg is quite simply that he is so out of line with what the Democrats really want politics to be, in the sense of the Democratic base, etc. That if Sanders will have a problem sort of attracting moderate voters, Bloomberg will have a problem attracting the base itself. Because as Elizabeth Warren just went after him in the debate, saying you're basically trying to buy the presidency. And that's obviously something that Democrats, who are by and large, especially today, left-wing, are not going to be happy about. So, case of Sanders having an issue with the topping and Bloomberg an issue with the base, and how that play out is going to be this thing. I think Bloomberg's attacks on Trump, I don't know how well they will play, because the kind of voters Trump is attracted with his attacks, they're not really the kind of voters Bloomberg is trying to attack. And it sort of is at odds with this whole thing of him being this moderate person who's trying to bring basically be a grown-up in charge, as opposed to the others. How that will play out. But again, as I said, Bloomberg obviously has a credentials problem with the base, and he's taken a bet that attacking Trump in the most harsh way possible at least sort of establishes his credentials with the Democratic base, who, as we all know, absolutely hate the president.
Yeah, you can't attack Trump for being Trump, because that's exactly what appeals to his voters, right? So but it's interesting that they still adopt the same line of opposition against him. And anyone wants to take Trump versus Biden, because Biden was again conventional favorite, but he seems to be slipping off late.
Yeah, so I think the problem with Biden has been that he's faced a lot of attacks from Trump, especially, and then also a lot from the media, because the media, especially the pro-democratic media, thought he was not liberal enough to be their candidate. And all of these attacks together, and his age, he's fairly old, in his mid-70s, has sort of, unexpectedly a bit clogged him down. Because if you look at the initial sort of these hypothetical polls of various Democrats against Trump, Biden was easily the best performer. And I think he's definitely the best bet to win your states that sort of was narrowly lost last time, the so-called blue wall, that is your Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, etc., which was very surprisingly lost by Hillary Clinton. And Biden, with his background, was widely expected to be that person who would do that. But I really don't think there's a very good chance for him to win the nomination anyway. And even if he now wins the nomination, he might just have been permanently weakened by all of this, all of his problems over the last few months, that the president might just find it fairly simple to defeat him.
Yeah, because that's as close to a Trump versus Hillary as possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, probably. Though I might say that even a Trump versus Bloomberg is fairly similar. So
cool. So let's move on to what this. So let's move on to what this all means to India. We have a last few minutes left, right? So anyone wants to go up? Aashish, do you want to take this? What the US elections mean for India? I mean, are we going to be better off with a Republican at the helm of it? Are we going to be better off with a Democratic president? Or, is it within Republican within Democratic Party, somebody else who would possibly, be better aligned with India's interests?
Sure, Roshan. So, see, a lot of analysis, even in the Indian media, focuses on the personal traits or the personal characteristics of the president, of the US president. The fact is that how a US president behaves internally, or what the policies are locally, isn't very relevant to us. I think what we should worry about is the bilateral relations or the larger geopolitics aspect. In that sense, my belief always has been that Republicans have been better for India in that on some of the important causes like the whole terrorism threat, the geopolitical equation with the Middle East. I think the Republicans understand concern much better and are likely to help India in difficult situations tactically in various forums globally. The Democrats increasingly are getting shriller around being more normative about their foreign policy, trying to be in line with the new age, young, woke crowd which votes for them in New York and California, which is the most visible part of the US political scene. And any Democratic candidate, and especially, looks like it will be either, if a Democrat has to win, it might be Sanders, looks like. Then that would be very bad for India in terms of the bilateral relations. You will hear US pontificating about Indian issues every day. Typically, even during the Clinton times, India got sanctioned for the nuclear test, for example, or I think Obama has had his own style of signaling inclusivity and religious freedom and things like that. But those leaders were never that never came in the way of the larger Indo-US the development of the bilateral relationships, be it on the military side or on the business side or on the trade side. With Sanders in the White House, that could be completely different, and to that extent, I think the Republicans are a better bet. Having said that, India will not have an easy way forward even with Trump, because if he gets a second term, he will come back strongly on India. His first term was focused on China in terms of the trade wars, and while some of that might continue, the fact is that he will probably train his guns on India next time in terms of some of his favorite items. So India will have to play this very carefully, even with Trump trying to make concessions on his favorite areas, trying to play to his ego, which is precisely what we are doing in the next couple of days. And as Trump famously said a few days ago, that India hasn't done much for the US, but he likes PM Modi. I think that kind of equation has to be continued, where he thinks that the Indians are his friends in general, and we make him a larger than life persona, which then can be leveraged hopefully for some of the discussion on the trade side.
Yeah, that's pretty much it from this episode of the Bharatvaarta podcast. Hope you found it useful, insightful, and interesting. We'll catch you soon. We're just putting this thing together, so a little rough around the edges, but we'll get better. And hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.